The Rhode Island Foundation, partnering with passionate Rhode Islanders to lead, transform, and inspire our state. Learn more at rhodeislandfoundation.org.
Welcome to another segment of In Another Opinion, a public information program where our discussions are focused on the communities of color in the state of Rhode Island. I'm your host, Peter Wells. My guest today is Public Safety Commissioner Steve Pare. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. You're one of the best cops I know, to use that expression.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. Listen, I want to just ask you today, I mean, things have changed in policing and in public safety in general. I mean, because you do you head the fire and the police department. But what challenges do you see in 2019 for Providence safety issues?
I think continuing on building a relationship with the community. We can't do the job of public safety, whether it's police or fire, without the trust of the community. It may sound, cliche and obvious, but it really is true, and we need to continue to build every single day into our community. So we have a relationship, and we have a comfort with our community to have difficult discussions, whether it's a use of force, deadly use of force, or just a treatment of people in the community by our police and fire. And without that comfort and trust, we wouldn't be able to do the job that's expected of us. So every single day we try to, and we should dedicate building that bond with our community across the region, because people come here not only to live, but to work and traverse and go to school and all of those things. So it's a big population. That's a challenge.
Well, it is, and I have to admit, local media, very seldom do I read or hear anything about a problem with police such as we have in other cities and towns across the country. And definitely very seldom you hear anything about fire. Usually firemen are too busy to have any other issues with the community if they're called. But it is, for Providence has shown to be itself, I guess, under your leadership, to have that relationship so we don't have that clashing of community and police activity.
Yeah, I've been with the city now 8 years, and I came from another department, from the state police, a statewide agency, and the urban policing is different, and it's critical that we have those relationships and have difficult discussions about race relations, about the perception that the community doesn't have an opportunity to serve in the police or the fire department, and knock those perceptions down and show that if you want to be a police officer here in Providence or a firefighter, you have an equal opportunity like everyone else, regardless of who they are.
Well, one of the questions I wanted to ask you is that about recruitment. Are we doing a little better with recruitment these days?
I think we are. In the last couple academies, we got to do a better job on the fire side. The percentage is probably not where I would like it, at 35% people of color, and we need to do a better job on the fire side. On the police side, we had a great diverse recruitment drive in our last academy, near 70% people of color and women. So it was probably one of the best that we've had. And we're starting an academy soon in 2019 on the police side as well. And the numbers are not as good as the last academy. We're just finishing the selection of those recruits, but focusing in on knocking the barriers down and giving people an opportunity across the city and across the region. It is our goal.
Let me ask you this, Steve. Are we getting any inroads into Asian communities as well in terms of police?
Some,
fire?
but not as great. That's reflective of the community, and that culture. We had We had a few in our last police academy, and that culture is quite different.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no trust with some of those cultures in those countries of the police, because it's a
Uniform
corrupt
thing.
police.
Yeah, yeah. Sure.
And so the family's not real supportive of their loved ones joining a police department. So we got to continue to work hard and bringing them into the police department and the fire department as well.
Very good. And it's a challenge. I know it is.
It is a challenge, and sometimes it takes, 3, 5, 10 years working in that community and building that trust, so they believe you that if their child or their loved one that they recommend and support into the police and fire will really have an opportunity. And there's reasons why they don't trust government, and that's a challenge for us.
Absolutely. Speaking of challenges, it's a good segue. What challenge do you see in handling traffic enforcement and just everyday activity, police activity, law enforcement activity, in the era of marijuana, legalized marijuana? It is an issue, obviously. Right now here in Rhode Island, it's okay medically speaking, but it's not yet legal socially. But how is that impacting in your officers, fire, in dealing with that issue?
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. We have too many deaths on our highways and roadways as a result of impairment. And when we talk about impairment, it's pretty much alcohol impairment, but we have other drugs as well, whether they're legal prescription drugs or now we have, marijuana right across the border in Massachusetts. And when you consume marijuana, it has an impact on your ability to drive an automobile. And so another challenge for law enforcement in trying to prevent impaired crashes and fatalities. Unfortunately, on January 1, we had a fatal crash right here in Providence, an hour and 35 minutes into the new year. We see too many, and they're senseless decisions that are made to either drink or smoke marijuana and then drive, and it has an impact. The challenge for law enforcement is we don't have an ability or a device to determine the level of impairment when it comes to marijuana. There's no device out there. We have advocated nationally to develop a device like a breath test or some other way of determining
something non-evasive.
Something's not non-evasive. We're not looking to pull blood from people, but when somebody is off, it's just another component that law enforcement now has to figure out legally. Is it impairment from alcohol? Well, we got that down in a breath test. Is it impairment from some other either prescription drug or now marijuana? And we know there's going to be an increase in crashes as a result of marijuana use. And we'd like to get in front of that as much as we can.
Yeah, because even making the distinction between impairment from a drug, be it marijuana or some other illegal drug,
right?
Or depending on what we're talking about, because prescription drugs can be just as bad as
they can
street drugs.
And so I believe educating. Don't get behind the wheel of a car if you feel as though you're not capable of doing it, whether you're taking a prescription Vicodin or some other legal drug. If you feel as though you're not able to, and it's really hard because everyone thinks, oh, I got this, I've been on these prescriptions, I have this, and then there's a crash and somebody's dead as a result of a decision being made. And now with the marijuana, we have medical marijuana. And that's a challenge in of itself because of the supply end, and we've seen that impact. And it's inevitable here in Rhode Island that we'll see recreational marijuana in due course, whether it's the next year or 2 or 3, but it's coming. But I advocate for the right tools for law enforcement so we can keep those people from driving.
Let me ask you this, Steve. If a person is stopped for whatever reason
Yes.
in a vehicle, and the police officer smells what he thinks or she thinks is marijuana,
Yes.
and I guess that's a just cause to investigate that. If a person has a marijuana card or from the health department, and they actually have marijuana in the car, how will you address that? Is that
Yeah, that gets tricky where, when you smell marijuana, marijuana is illegal. It's been decriminalized, up until a certain weight now. And if you have the lawful right to use marijuana
right?
with a medical marijuana card, that changes the dynamics. Whereas prior to this, the smell or the evidence of marijuana in a vehicle gives the police officer more latitude with probable cause and
Right.
then seeking. So now it gets a little trickier for police officers on the side of the road when they have a lawful right to possess and use marijuana. It doesn't give us as much legal ability to then take it further. And so those are some of the challenges. Look,
Yeah.
it's coming, and I understand why it's coming. We've monitored out in Colorado, but there's impacts when you go to recreational marijuana. And
Absolutely.
we have enough abuse in substances, whether it's alcohol, opioid, or some other substance. We have enough, and bringing on marijuana, we just need to be funded in those programs that break that addiction when people are addicted to those drugs.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. I mean, always being a police officer is a no-win situation in many cases. But I think the challenge is facing police officers today with addictions is really, really difficult. And I don't think police were really designed for addictions. This may be a medical issue,
Sure.
but there's still public safety involved.
Sure. Yeah, Providence Police went several years ago and provided Narcan to all our police officers.
Right.
Now, that's different. That's a medical, device or substance in order to save people's lives that are overdosing. And we've had great success, like any other department across the country, with a first responder and someone's unresponsive and an apparent overdose. We're actually saving lives, which is great, but it's not what police officers either were trained to do
Right.
or were expected to do. But a life is a life, and that's what we do now.
Here we are in 2019.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And we see more and more of that. Unfortunately, everyone has someone that struggles with an addiction or died of an overdose, and it's heartbreaking when you see the numbers and the waste of human life because of an addiction. And we're doing everything that we can, particularly on the police and certainly on the fire side, with safe stations in the fire departments where you can come to any fire station 24/7 anytime and say, I need help with my addiction. No
Really?
questions asked. We connect you with a coach within 20 minutes, and we've saved lives
Wow,
as
I
a
didn't know
result
that.
of that as well.
Well,
So
that's great.
it is. It's a program that we hijacked out of New Hampshire and replicated here, and we've had dozens and dozens of people come in. You gotta have a system in which, when somebody is ready for recovery, whether it's 2 in the morning on a Sunday morning or 5 in the afternoon on a Friday, you gotta have a system ready to take that person, because the window of their recovery opportunity
Small.
is really small.
Sure. I'm on the street a lot, doing what I do, and I see street people who are laying in doorways or at the bus stops and things of that nature, and you think they're sleeping, but in some cases they may have OD'd.
Sure.
And knowing what the opioid crisis has done across the country, have you seen an increase or a decrease here in Rhode Island as of late?
Well, we've seen a huge increase in the past couple of years. It's sort of leveled off, and last calendar year we've seen a bit of a decrease. But when you're talking about 300 people dying as a result of an overdose, that's a lot of people.
Was that from last year? Or?
That was from last year and the
Wow.
year before. So we had that many deaths in the state of Rhode Island. You know, some programs, you know, we believe have had an effect on that number, and it's starting to come down. But even when you're talking about 200 deaths, it's way too many as a result of fentanyl that's being laced in heroin and other substances. It's just it's an epidemic that we need to get our hands around as a community.
Well, this I'm not asking you to disclose any secret work that you might be doing, but it seems to me, and Rhode Island's not that big a place. Just, and Providence is even smaller as it relates to dealers versus suppliers. It would seem to me that we would have a fair knowledge of who they are. I guess what makes it so hard for us to bring these people down, especially the suppliers to the street dealers?
It's so lucrative, and they start so young when it's easy to make money selling drugs. And so you'll always have people taking that risk, despite the consequences, despite I'll never get caught because I know how to do this and get away with it. So you have that level of street dealing that there'll always be people that try to take advantage of a system and make money and not really have to work for it. So the demand side and the supply side is always that balance. We will never, not being pessimistic, but there'll always be a supply side because there's a demand side. We got to knock the demand side down. So if we're able to do that in education, and we started this years ago with different programs in our schools, and try to keep people away from those drugs that cause so much harm. That's, we'll never be able to arrest our way out of this. There's not enough prisons because it's too lucrative.
And right now it seems to me that from a national level, that's changing in terms of justice reform.
Overcrowding, and we're putting people in jail for a long period of time. Look, jails have a place in our community and in our country as well, but we have to rethink what we're doing, particularly with drugs, and how we're able to have an impact on both the demand and the supply. We're not going to be able to just continue to incarcerate people. There's got to be a better way, because it's a waste of human life just putting people in jail for 30 and 40 and 50 years.
And expensive.
And very expensive.
I did a stint, if you recall, with the Public Defender's Office, and that was some years ago. And at that time, the annual cost was somewhere around $40,000 or $45,000 a year to house someone for misdemeanors.
Yes.
I mean, and or felonies that weren't violent felonies.
Yes.
Of course, even more for that.
Very costly, and if you look at that investment or the cost to the taxpayers, and taking that and putting it into another program that can rehabilitate, give opportunity, whether it's education, housing, it's a vicious cycle, and we're spending a lot of money locking people up. I don't have the solution, but we continue to work towards the impact of illegal drugs.
And there's a conflict between federal law, state law, and services in terms of regulations. I mean, I also worked for HUD at one time, and if you have even a misdemeanor conviction for drugs, it's very difficult to get into public housing.
Right.
You may lose access to school loans.
Right.
I mean, so our society is set up to punish you or someone continually for these crimes, especially those related to drugs. But that's not something that we can control at the local level, I understand.
Right.
But we're kind of captive to what the federal government wants to do in terms of some of those issues.
Right. Where do you expect these people to go when they make a mistake?
Exactly.
And you shut off opportunities for employment, housing. Then you see them on Broad Street. You see them, in Kennedy Plaza, because they have to survive and they're going to go somewhere. So we got to rethink that as well. Rehabilitation's a real important aspect of our criminal justice system, and giving someone another opportunity or even a third and fourth chance is a lot less expensive than just warehousing them in a jail.
Words matter, and one of the things that and we both have used it in this conversation, we talk about people making a quote-unquote a mistake. It might be better if we started looking at the issue as people making bad choices. It's not a mistake, not when you willingly did something. It's a choice, and it's a bad choice.
Sure.
Now, I mean, from the back end, we say mistake to be somewhat polite to the individual. But when people make bad choices, it has to be addressed as a bad choice, I think, rather than just a mistake. Mistake sounds too easy, but words matter.
Sure, and I agree. And as a society, we need to give people another opportunities, because bad choices are made by smart people, by educated people, by everyone across this country. We all make bad choices, and we can't suppress those people that make bad choices. When it turns criminal, even when it does, there are choices that are made, and we can't put all those people in jail, because that's not the country that was built.
And taxpayers would really scream if we did that.
Sure.
Steve, talking about just law enforcement in general, some of the improvements. I know body cameras was something that was considered by some police officers something we didn't want to do.
Sure.
But now we've had some experience, at least about a year or so now, that we've had body cameras on I guess a majority of the officers in the field. How's that working out?
I applaud the Providence Police Department. We started talking about body cams about 2 years ago. We test piloted. There were a handful of police officers that wore them, tried them out. And it's like anything else. It's a change, and it's an education, and what's the value to it? And there wasn't an incident that created, a move towards body cam. The colonel and I and the command staff strongly believe that this is the way of the future.
Yes.
And when police officers are being captured on iPhones in the street for that 10 ugly seconds in which force is administered, you don't see the preceding 12 minutes, or you don't see the subsequent 3 minutes, and so you only got that snapshot, and then it's up on social media, and you're dealing with what you're dealing with. And this captures from the beginning through and then to the end. It gives us a better story of what the police officer is doing and why they're doing it. I think it's going to be eventual across the country. People expect our police officers to be both transparent and, with technology, have video and audio when there's interaction with the community. So I applaud the Providence Police in voluntarily agreeing and wearing body cams. All our uniformed police officers wear a body cam.
All the uniforms, very good.
All the uniforms, and I think it's been a success. We've seen a little bit of that with our highway shooting about a year ago.
Yes.
People today want to see. They just don't want a police officer to describe what happened. They want to see, and they want to hear.
Sure.
And
makes sense.
With the ability of technology, you're able to do that without impeding, a police officer's responsibility and daily function. So it's been positive, I think, with both the community, and I think it's been embraced by the majority of the police department. Not everyone wants,
Sure.
you know, a camera and audio on their shoulder. Nobody wants that, but we are public servants. We signed up for policing, and it's one of those expectations that I think it's good for policing.
I don't know. Did the state police wear them?
They do not.
Okay.
There's only one. Cranston is piloting body cams. They're the only department that I'm aware of that is considering full employment of body cams.
Well, I think you're right. I think the general public wants to see. I think there's been enough good and bad press across the country with policing, and especially when, as you say, when there's a force in use. So I think it's a good idea. I think maybe one day we may have them on firemen too.
Yeah, as you know, as the cost of these come down, I think you're right.
Yeah. You know, you turn on the TV and you watch Bad Boys. I guess that's one of those programs. It's the police or you see a program about firemen entering a building and doing things. You know, on one hand, it's great TV, but on the other hand, it does satisfy some people's need to know how things are done beyond, as you say, the police officer or the fireman describing what took place.
Right. I mean, Cops was around, and that's the show you're referring to, and they did segments in Providence 20 years ago or so, and they wanted to do another piece, and we didn't think it was in our best interest to do that kind of show. Live PD is another one that wanted to do segments in Providence, and we didn't think it was good for the Providence police or the community to do those things. There are a lot of reasons why people are intrigued by, look, we have body cam, it protects, you know, the department, and it provides, you know,
The safety for both.
It is.
Steve, listen, I hate to say we're running out of time, but I'd like to thank you today for being our guest today, and you, the viewers, for tuning in to another segment of In Another Opinion. A special thanks to Rhode Island PBS for making this program possible. I'm your host, Peter Wells. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at IA Opinion, and have a nice day.
The Rhode Island Foundation, partnering with passionate Rhode Islanders to lead, transform, and inspire our state. Learn more at rhodeislandfoundation.org.